Well, nice to hear you guys out. Wonderful discussion. A very eclectic group. Lots of interesting points. Um, and well, it's interesting that you're discussing right now the Cold War roots of the whole geopolitical confrontation we're observing right now. And like, yeah, well, I'm living currently in Chile, from Argentina, and like to go to JD's point about the soft power of U.S. influence, it's a dilemma for me because I don't know, I can't like particularly rewrite history to understand how it would be in another scenario, but like here in South America, at least, there was like really severe dictatorships sponsored, like overtly sponsored by U.S. foreign policy to avoid like the monolithic communist idea, which might have been Soviet foreign policy. It's not exactly visible in the world. If it was actually like that, maybe it's like just an abstract ideal that communism was, like, in their words, the best system, the most just, whatever, and so they wanted the world to become communist in a like abstract sense, or maybe it was a real world conquest scenario. But like from my perspective, at least, of my understanding of history, Russia has been like really severely damaged by Western invasion, like devastating, like horrific scenarios. So it's logical that they have a certain apprehension to like what military movements go on in the West, right? Specifically after the Great Patriotic War, like for them, World War II, the situation didn't actually improve for them after, like NATO formed and there was immediately another Western bloc ready to confront them. So that for me kind of explains like what you say is true. JD, no one is going to go and attack Russia because they have nukes, right? But there is a progressive encroachment on them, and you have a very like clear example in what happened to Yugoslavia, how like an internal conflict immediately turned into a NATO invasion, and then dismembering the country. So there's a like giving the devil his due, there's a realistic perspective of risk because Russia hasn't been invaded from outside in the past 80 years, but it has suffered these internal conflicts like what happened to Yugoslavia, or like what happened to Syria, or like what happened, they've had these sort of regional conflicts that could threaten to devolve into sort of an internal schism that would threaten their like integrity as a state.
I would like to add one thing, if that's okay. You did cover these internal conflicts, but you have not covered the slow infestation of this Western culture into Russia. Of like this wokeism, this very what would you call it? I want to say far left, but it's not far left, right? It's this very overly tolerant.
No, it's globalist.
Globalist. Yes, this globalist regime.
Globalist liberal mentality. Yeah, basically.
Yeah, I want to address that too, because there's this whole idea that like we've become this like end of Rome, like there's something wrong with us. We got no values and everything. We're at the front of all the complexities. You know, people can look down at their nose for us in China and Mexico and Europe, but they were like basically like one type of society. It was all Chinese. It was all Mexicans. It's all Indians. It's all Pakistanians. Here, there's everybody. And yes, we look bad from the outside, but we're working on it. Like there's everybody from every ethnicity here and every cultural aspect. So we are basically hashing out everything before the rest of the world has to hash it out, you know? So we aren't degenerates, we're hashing out the next generation of ideas. There were people like there were still countries that had slavery in Africa after the United States abolished it. You know,
We're not degenerates. We just let transsexual people show their tits on the White House lawn and publish it on all social medias.
That's not a good look, but the world is headed a different direction whether you want it or not. Like people, you know, in 20, 30 years, people
whether we want it or not. No, absolutely not. It's not. The world is resisting against it, in fact.
I don't know, man. People are going to do what they're going to do, man. You know, in 20, 30 years, there's going to be a technology so people can graft animal ears on their head and have tails. Like, the world is going to change. It's just the way it is. And 30 years ago, my parents grew up in segregated schools. So, and people were saying the exact same thing you were then, where like, this is bullshit. We can't have these blanks in our schools. Like, things change. The world moves on.
JB, you served, right?
No.
Okay, I wouldn't ask that question.
Okay.
But
yes, things change. Are you arguing that things are changing for the better, or they're just bound to change?
We're just at the front of it. We're at the social battlefield of the world, like at the center of it. Like, there's so many cultures, there's so many ideas. That's the beauty of America. Yeah, it's an ugly mess. It's a hot mess, but like, that's the beauty of America, is that we're working on the issues before everybody else has to deal with them. Look at Europe, man. Europe was looking down there at nose at us for years. And then all of a sudden they got North African immigrants and it's a mess. They're like,
well, that's bullshit that you're talking. It's not
you sound like a globalist, bro.
Yeah.
No, they're rioting and protesting and not wanting to live with them. Like, they just never had to deal with it before. Look at, you know, Brexit. Like they had a bunch of immigration and they didn't like it. Like,
yeah, and look how many homeless people you have on the streets in the United States.
Yeah, it's a hot mess. I'm telling you. But
they fucking prefer to invest in Ukraine.
We're not figuring it out. We have a utterly corrupt political system that only helps themselves and allows the average people to suffer. That's not working it out. That's allowing the average man to suffer while the political class makes
people
money.
Keep voting for the Bidens and the Trumps of the world. Quit voting for those people. Vote for somebody else.
Who else is there to vote, man? It's either Biden or Trump, right? There's no one else to vote, right?
So, regardless, can we roll this back in, please? So, regardless of the politics, right? Below the politics is culture, and that usually drives law and people actually abiding the law, right? In America, we have an issue of people actually talking about childlessness, nuclear family, deconstructing what that means, and when we look at the sociological aspects and ramifications of that over hundreds of thousands of years, that is extremely dangerous. And when we do talk about the U.S., we do know that the U.S.